Hey guys, just a quick little note before we start things off here. I am, again, sorry that this is so late. I've always kind of prided myself on having a decent schedule, especially with a show like this, and to have done what I did this week, or this month even, just it's kind of inexcusable. I mean, I obviously took a big break in 2023 when I broke my leg, but, that at least was understandable. In this case, I would have it on there. It's like, okay, I got to get this read and start scripting and everything. And I'd even scripted the prologue a little bit in advance, so hopefully it wouldn't take so long. And it still wound up taking long. And I don't know if it's much I just didn't juggle my schedule as well or what happened. But yeah, again, sorry this is late. I will try to be more timely with these in the future. At some point I might take time. I might take another large break just to bank episodes, so that way we can actually get these out on a more regular basis. Okay, on with the show. So, January of 2025 marks 10 years of the Random Trade Review. It's not the 10th anniversary, that would be next year. Learn the Gregorian calendar, people. And, outside of the big break I had to take in late 2023 with my broken leg, obviously I've tried to keep things on a regular schedule. If you didn't notice my prologue earlier, that obviously didn't happen this time. But still, throughout the years, there really isn't too much I would necessarily change. Which means if you were expecting some type of apologia about my review of the Eltingville Club, yeah, you ain't getting it.
Now then, there have been a few things that date some of my earlier episodes. For example, one of the major complaints I had about episodes 17 and 51, which covered the Avengers storyline Under Siege and the DC crossover event Legends respectively, was that issues containing what I felt to be important parts of the stories were missing. Well, since then, there have been re-releases that actually do contain those tie-in issues. Now, it doesn't really affect my grade since I wasn't reading those collections at the time, and so I can't necessarily say anything, but maybe if you want to just bump it up, or if you're looking for a more complete story, that's probably okay. There are better versions available now.
Other than that, I really haven't had that many regrets. Except, of course, knowing what we now know about Neil Gaiman makes the fact that I really extolled his virtues in my 100th episode covering all of Sandman a little awkward and uncomfortable. Then again, I'm not the only person who's sung the praises of Neil Gaiman.
Also, I have mentioned in some previous retrospectives that the first two episodes of my show, which covered Fantastic Four Disassembled and the Marvel crossover event World War Hulk respectively, are ones I'm not particularly proud of, and it's not just because they're early episodes. I stupidly tried to do those episodes without a script and recite everything off the top of my head, and so it just made the whole thing feel really clunky, and I was missing plot points, and also I made a joke that was maybe just a little too obscure for its own good, as I referenced a podcast I used to listen to called the Alter Ego Comics Cast, which, during the time that one of these storylines came out, they had a running joke of which, where they were fascinated by ads for ballpark franks that were centered around people being so hungry that additional appendages would burst from their abdomens to cram hot dogs down their gullet. Anyway, the episodes just kind of come across as being very amateurish and, again, not well thought out.
So today we're going to be revisiting the first two episodes of the Random Trade Review, and, well, we're going to do them right. Giving them a more in-depth review, a bit more history, and, like I said, a better recap, and overall just better notes and everything. So, again, here we are with the Redux. Let's do Fantastic Four Disassembled and World War Hulk. Starting with Fantastic Four Disassembled. The early 2000s proved to be something of a renaissance for the Fantastic Four. After a decade of inexplicable boob windows and Heroes Reborn, the book got revitalized by the creative team of writer Mark Waid and art by the late great Mike Wieringo.
Waid and Wieringo repositioned the first family of Marvel as Imaginauts, returning them to their sci-fi origins. The book would then revert back to its original numbering with issue 500, with a story that saw the team renew their fight with longtime nemesis Dr. Doom, ultimately resulting in the team taking over Doom's homeland of Latveria, and Reed Richards receiving a scar on his face like that of his longtime rival. However, these events would wind up blowing up in the team's face, as it turns out much of the Latverian populace actually liked Dr. Doom as their leader. Added to that, Doom would wind up making one last charge by attempting to transfer his soul into Reed and Sue's daughter Valeria. However, he kind of misfired and instead wound up possessing Ben Grimm, aka The Thing, instead. Still, Doom Thing was able to inflict enough damage that Reed was forced to kill his best friend in order to free him from Doom's grip, and then the remaining members of the Fantastic Four would flee from Latveria. The next major story would see Reed trying desperately to save Ben's soul and ultimately meeting God, aka Jack Kirby, who would restore Ben to life and remove Reed's disfigurement. And then things started to fall apart.
At some point, it was either at a convention or some type of writer's retreat, I'm not entirely sure. Marvel president Bill Jemas approached Waid with a story idea he thought was rather entertaining. The story would revolve around Reed Richards being swindled by a money manager, leading to the Fantastic Four having to declare bankruptcy and having to get regular jobs. Waid responded by laughing in Jemas' face. This was not a good idea.
Yes, in a shocking twist, it turns out that insultingly laughing in the face of the person who signs your paycheck is not exactly sound career advice. Waid was fired from the book and replaced by Broadway playwright Roberto Aguirre Sacasca, with Wieringo quitting in protest and being replaced by artist Steve McNiven. However, once this news broke, there was a massive fan backlash to this, which combined with a few other things resulted in Jemas being fired and Waid and Wieringo being brought back to do a proper send-off story.
Sacasca and McNiven would eventually be given their own series under the Marvel Knights banner that was just titled 4. It was okay, but mostly forgettable. As for Waid and Wieringo, well, they would set forth with kind of a 15-ish part story that would close out their run, which would consist of a 3-part story followed by an 8-part story. The first part of that 8-part story would then tie into the Avengers Disassembled story that was going on at Marvel at the time to reboot that super team. And today we're covering the first part of that. This is Fantastic Four Disassembled.
The Fantastic Four have returned to New York City, but it's not exactly feeling like home, as the team's shenanigans in Latveria have left a very sour taste in the public's mouths. Ben Grimm can't even get a hot dog from his usual vendor, and things begin to take a turn for the worse when a bus passenger launches his drink at the thing, which results in the giant rock monster almost flipping the bus over. All of this is to the great delight of the Wizard, who feels it's time for a reunion of the Frightful Four. That being said, there's going to be a few replacements here.
The Frightful Four are basically an evil version of the Fantastic Four, headed up by Bentley Whitman, aka the Wizard, a super genius on the level of Reed Richards, who's jealous at Richards because he gets more recognition. Joining Whitman is the Trapster, a longtime Human Torch villain, Peter Petrusky, who specializes in constructing little adhesive traps, originally known as Paste Pot Pete before getting a more dignified moniker. Now, in the original incarnation of the Frightful Four, there was a unique membership here, where you have 2 villains that were effectively turned heroes. You had Medusa of the Inhumans, the queen and wife of Black Bolt, the Inhuman leader, who had suffering amnesia and thus believed she was part of the Wizard. And then you also had longtime Spider-Man foe, Sandman, who eventually reformed and is now more of a good guy-ish character. So to replace them, we have a new character in Salamandra, we'll get more into her later, and we also have another longtime Spider-Man foe, Hydro-Man, who is basically a water version of Sandman. We'll touch on him a little bit later as well.
The wizard points out that he's been slowly putting the right pieces into the right places and playing a master game of chess with the Fantastic Four as he continues to watch the family as they razz Johnny Storm for being out on a date with a young woman he met through his thought-to-be-defunct fan club. The rest of the family ends up tailing Johnny, who meets up with his date, a young girl named Cole, who immediately begins doubling over in pain and flipping out at the sight of Reed Richards. It's then that a strange earthquake suddenly whips up and causes a local delicatessen to collapse. Cole runs off with Johnny in pursuit as the rest of the group is yelled at by the business owner and just decides to head home. Johnny catches up to Cole and begins to relate things to her as she explains that she is from a broken home with her father only recently re-entering the picture, as her mother is really only interested in dating wealthy men. Johnny admits that he can relate given that his father is also a convict. However, what Cole isn't letting Johnny in on is that her parents are the wizard and Salamandra.
So yes, the wizard was briefly married to Salamandra, who is a dragon princess who can also take human form. Their daughter is Cole, and we'll get more into her origin a little bit later. I wish I could get more into these characters, but this is literally their only appearance.
Johnny brings Cole back to the Baxter building to use the bathroom, and while she leaves, Reed comes storming in, flipping out as Hayes deduced her identity. He did so after studying the amount of graviton levels at the earthquake site and deciding that there was only one individual who could have possibly known that much about gravity.
Now, the wizard can actually manipulate graviton particles via a series of discs that he has. He can use it to levitate, he can use it to pin people to walls, he can use them for pretty much anything. Now, it is funny that Reed is saying that only the wizard can use these graviton particles when there actually is a Marvel villain called Graviton.
The wizard is able to bring the Frightful Four into the Baxter building by utilizing a ring on Cole's finger as a teleportation device. The rest of the Fantastic Four begin fighting the Frightful Four plus one. Unfortunately, the Fantastic Four are so discombobulated that even Sue's invisibility is thwarted by Hydro Man creating a mist. However, the Trapster winds up ensnaring Johnny in one of his traps, and when Cole tries to intervene, the Trapster turns his weapon on him, only for the wizard to turn on him, pointing out that it's the Frightful Four, not the Frightful Five.
Frightful Five might actually be trademarked by DC.
Wizard doesn't kill Trapster, though. He just winds up putting him in a time loop as he explains that the whole attack has been live-streamed on the internet. And now herky-jerky footage of the FF looking even more pathetic is out there for everyone to see, and he teleports away. Once back in their headquarters, the wizard explains that he genetically programmed Cole's powers using the machine to actually impregnate Salamandra. Now he wants to help her focus her powers so that she can use it to eventually help him take over the world. Of course. Cole, not wanting to be a part of any of this, breaks free and starts to escape without getting much chase from anyone. Meanwhile, Salamandra is literally having Hydro Man draw a bath for her.
Form of a wash rack.
Back at the Baxter building, the Fantastic Four are upset with Cole as she had violated her trust. However, Johnny still wants to track her down as he's still concerned for her. Unfortunately, Reed hasn't invented a graviton detection device, so Johnny flies off to try to track her down. While the two had been talking earlier, Johnny talked about where he hangs out on the Chrysler building in order to get some focus. It's there that he actually finds Cole waiting for him, and she explains what the wizard did to her, and that she was hoping for Reed to possibly cure her, hence meeting Johnny through his fan club. It turns out the other members of the Fantastic Four heard the conversation, as Reed had managed to whip up a graviton detection device in a matter of seconds and track the two down. He may actually be able to cure Cole, but to do so, he's going to need access to the wizard's main files on her. Which means it's now time for payback.
In case you're wondering why it is that Reed Richards could cure Cole, but not, say, his good friend Ben Grimm, which he has long promised and tried to seek out a cure, it's because Cole is kind of a mutant. She's been affected on a genetic level, and since it's involved manipulation, he could possibly reverse engineer it outside of the radiation-based powers of the Fantastic Four.
The group uses Cole's ring to sneak back into the Frightful Four's headquarters, and another fight breaks out with Salamandra assuming full dragon form in order to fight with Sue, while Cole, Johnny, and Reed try to get into the wizard's main computer room. Johnny works to try to take down Hydro Man as the group gets into the said computer room, only for Cole to have to activate her graviton powers again, which winds up having an adverse effect as she collapses to the ground, seemingly drained and dead. Seemingly worried, the wizard places his daughter in a device to manage to feed her more gravitons and restore her. In doing so, he winds up leaving the main computer room open, and so Reed is able to eavesdrop and actually learn the files that the wizard had collected on his daughter. Reed and the wizard begin fighting again, and the distraction is enough for Cole to begin absorbing so many gravitons that she begins to alter her form and actually grow the entire computer room out of the building and up into the sky, destroying the facility in the process.
This is pretty much our last opportunity to touch on Hydro Man, so let's just get into that. Maury Bench was a merchant marine who got exposed to radioactive chemicals in water after being thrown overboard on a ship alongside those chemicals. Now he has the ability to literally transform water and take various stages of water in their forms. And basically, yes, he is a longtime Spider-Man villain, but he has worked with the Frightful Four on a few occasions as well, with the wizard having recently augmented his powers.
Cole screams that she's sick of her father's actions, but also acknowledges that there's a part of her that still cares for him. Still, he needs to be stopped, so she slams the entire computer room with the two inside deep into the East River. The Fantastic Four spend the next few hours searching for her. However, due to the graviton saturation, they can't use the particle detector, and no other bodies turn up. However, Reed can't be sure it's been the last time we've seen these people.
Now, as you may recall, back when I reviewed the first volume of Infamous Iron Man back in episode 206 of the Random Trade Review, the wizard did actually pop up in that, so we know he's okay, but like I said before, Salamander and Cole, well, they've done vanished and haven't been heard from since, so I guess they're dead. Anyway, that concludes the first part of this story as we now move into what is the Avengers Disassembled tie-in of Fantastic Four Disassembled. And by that, I mean these actually takes place after the events of Avengers Disassembled. I'll get in more to it later.
It's Halloween, and Sue is out with Ben, taking Franklin and Valeria out trick-or-treating to mixed results. Back at the Baxter building, Johnny and Reed are going over some of the recent patents that Reed has applied for, though really they're just trying to figure out how many employees are willing to stay with the company given recent events. That's interrupted by a large amount of winds and seismic activity, seemingly ripping the island of Manhattan from the earth. New York City is being pelted with tsunamis as the mayor wants to call in the Avengers, who have unfortunately disbanded. As four large pillars suddenly appear on the island of Manhattan, the mayor has left no other choice but to pull out the Fantastic Four flare gun and send out the FF signal to try to contact the group.
I'm guessing the Fantastic Four already know about this.
Reed and Johnny arrive to help Ben and Sue get bystanders to safety and to drop the kids off with Alicia Masters. After that, it's back to the Baxter building, where Reed scans the four columns and discovers that they are indeed elevating the island of Manhattan, with the idea to be to fling the whole island into the sun and thus create a clone capable of killing Superman. Knowing that he needs to focus on accessing the main computer, which is located in the south column, Reed fits Ben with a communication device so that he can keep in contact with the others as they try to run a distraction in the different columns. However, once inside, Reed discovers that the control computer is blocked by an invisible wall, meaning that he's going to need Sue. Unfortunately, she, Ben, and Johnny are busy being attacked by tentacle monsters.
So they're Japanese aliens.
The trio are soon overwhelmed and are taken before the alien leader named Zaius. Added to that, a TV news crew has somehow hacked the broadcast signal from Ben's device, and now they're beaming it everywhere. Zaius explains that all of this has to do with none other than Galactus. Zaius' planet was destroyed by the World Eater, and ever since he has traveled the cosmos finding similar people and developing a planet-cloaking technology to spare other worlds the same fate. However, a recent meeting with the Skrulls revealed that Galactus has turned his attention back to Earth. Not for consumption, mind you, but rather to find a new herald, Sue Storm.
Basically, the powers of Susan Storm Richards include the ability to turn invisible, as well as the ability to project invisible force fields and nullify invisible force fields. That's why Reed needs her in the computer room to get rid of the invisible force field that's blocking that. However, if she were, say, recruited by Galactus to be his new herald, she could easily disable the planet cloaking technology, which would make those planets ripe for attack from Galactus.
Despite the protests of the others, Sue accepts that her well-being pales in comparison to the rest of the galaxy and agrees to be executed. However, just before the machine can be turned on, Reed comes barging his way in holding a gun which he knows can solve everything.
Typical American male.
Reed blasts Sue, and Zaius' computer shows that Sue's biological makeup has changed and she can no longer turn invisible. Reed tells the aliens to book it and that they've handled Galactus before and they can handle him again if need be, as the Fantastic Four will always be there to defend their home. All of this is being seen on television and restores the public's faith in the Fantastic Four once again. It's not all wine and roses, though, as Ben is upset that Reed somehow managed to cure Sue, but not him. But Reed didn't actually cure Sue, as he pushes her off a roof and tells her to flame on. All the gun did was switch Johnny and Sue's powers, meaning that Johnny Storm is now the Invisible Boy. Unfortunately, their comfort is extremely short-lived, as Galactus soon appears in the sky and immediately selects Johnny Storm to be his new herald.
So you may be wondering what exactly this story has to do with Avengers Disassembled. Well, not much, really. Like I said, this actually takes place after the events of Avengers Disassembled. So, yeah. In fact, this was a problem with a lot of the Avengers Disassembled tie-ins. They really didn't tie in that much outside of a few throwaway lines here and there about the Avengers Mansion being in trouble, or the attack on the Avengers Mansion. There were some noteworthy aspects. I mean, Iron Man resigned as Secretary of Defense, a role he would later reclaim after the Civil War event. Then Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man, got organic web shooters like he had in the Sam Raimi movies. Thor died, and Captain America had a one-night stand with the Scarlet Witch that has never really been mentioned since. I think you're kind of getting the point here. Anyway, that concludes our look at Fantastic Four Disassembled. How was it? Well, I do think on the plus side, the artwork is really well done. It's not all the late white Mike Wieringo here. There's another artist I can't remember who it is, unfortunately. But they're very good. They draw almost exactly like Wieringo, so it's not that much of a tonal shift when they switch back to Wieringo. So it's not too far away from this. And basically, it's really good. There's some good characterization. There's good banter between the characters. You're reminded that to really rate Reed Richards well, you have to. Yes, he's often portrayed as this aloof, not very aware of his surrounding scientist who's only focused on getting his science goals done. But you have to also remember that he does care about his family and will do anything for them when the time comes. And, you know, again, that sometimes a lot of the creative people kind of get away from that, and that paints him as the bad guy. Case in point, a lot of the stuff that happened with him during the Civil War and just afterwards storylines, those have never quite worked as well for me. So yeah, there's a lot of that works really well. If there's a problem with this, it's basically the layout. Again, I mentioned before, though, this really does not tie into Avengers Disassembled so much, so it doesn't make sense to call it that. I had to call this, Fantastic Four Disassembled. And to be honest, I don't think they collected the right parts of the story. We should be following up with Johnny Storm as the Herald of Galactus, which is what the final story arc of Wade Wieringo's run on Fantastic Four was. But that's not included in here. Instead, we get the stuff with the Frightful Four and Cole, which doesn't really add much to the story at all. In fact, if you had gone before this, I think I can't quite place this. You had the Fantastic Four meets God storyline, and then you had a two-part story with the Human Torch and Spider-Man that was really fun, and then you had this three-part story with the Frightful Four. I think if you just combined those into its own separate volume and then use Fantastic Four Disassembled to do this Johnny Storm being the Herald of Galactus story, I think that would have worked a lot better. And obviously that's nothing to do with the creative team, more just, what Marvel did with their trades at the time that made things really confusing. And, this isn't something I could recommend to a new reader. If you want to get into to Wade Wieringo's Fantastic Four run, start at the beginning, because that's really the best stuff. It really does kind of peter out towards the end, unfortunately. And Obviously, I think the behind-the-scenes shenanigans got into that a little. So, yeah, I can't really give this a full recommendation. I am going to give Fantastic Four Disassembled a D. And with that, let's move on to part 2 of our episode where we look at World War Hulk. The mid-2000s really became the era of event comics for the major 2 publishers, Marvel and DC. DC would have Identity Crisis, Marvel would counter with House of M. Marvel would have Civil War, DC would answer with Infinite Crisis and the weekly series 52. DC was doing Countdown, which was leading into its really big event, Final Crisis, and Marvel, well, did this.
Everybody got that? Good!
In the second story arc of the series New Avengers, writer Brian Michael Bendis introduced readers to Marvel's Illuminati, a secret society consisting of Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, Charles Xavier of the X-Men, Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, Black Bolt of the Inhumans, Doctor Strange, and Namor the Submariner. The group, at Stark's behest, basically tried to future-proof the Marvel Universe, working in secret to prevent any future major attacks to varying degrees of success. After an incident which saw the Hulk attack Las Vegas, members except for Namor and Xavier concluded that the Hulk needed to be taken care of permanently, just not lethally.
Basically, the Illuminati asked Dr. Bruce Banner to work on a damaged satellite and then lured him onto a ship which they then blasted into deep space to what they thought was a peaceful and underdeveloped planet.
Instead, the Hulk would end up on the planet Sakaar, where a ruler called the Red King forced him to compete in gladiatorial games with a group called the Warbound, consisting of individuals named Meek, Eloi Coffey, Korg, Hiroyam, and a member of the Brood known simply as No Name. The Warbound would bond together with the Hulk and go on to lead a resurrection against the Red King that was tipped in their favor when the chief of security named Kyra joined forces with them and fell in love with the Hulk. The Hulk would be crowned the new leader of Sakaar and marry Kyra, who would soon become pregnant with his child. Unfortunately, shortly thereafter, Meek discovered that the radioactive core of the ship that brought the Hulk to Sakaar had been compromised and was going to explode. He tried to get word back to the Hulk, but unfortunately the core went off, devastating much of the planet and killing Kyra along with the unborn child.
Now the Hulk is leading his warbound back towards Earth to take revenge on those he feels are truly responsible. This is World War Hulk.
A commotion rocks the lunar city of Adelan, bringing out Black Bolt and his queen Medusa. They are greeted by a very angry Hulk who grabs the king of the Inhumans. Black Bolt's whisper, usually enough to throw even the strongest individual a number of miles, is useless as the Hulk leaps back, wanting a scream instead. Afterwards, the Hulk's visage appears in Times Square. He explains what happened on Sakaar and how the Illuminati are responsible for all of it as he holds the unconscious Black Bolt aloft. The remaining members of the Illuminati have 24 hours to turn themselves over to the Warbound or face the consequences. Iron Man takes off into space to confront the Hulk, but is halted by the astral protection of Doctor Strange, who says it would be best to just take the remaining time to prepare for a proper response.
Or, you could just turn yourself in, save everyone a whole heaping load of trouble.
Stark and Reed Richards pay a visit to Robert Reynolds, aka the Sentry, to try to talk him into helping them confront the Hulk, as the Jade Giant trusts him openly. Unfortunately, Reynolds' agoraphobia is acting up, so New York City is evacuated, and Iron Man pulls out the latest incarnation of his Hulkbuster armor to take out the Hulk. Stark accepts full responsibility for what happened, but asks for the Hulk to spare everyone else as he blasts the Hulk into Central Park. Meanwhile, a bunch of patrons in a bar cheer on the possible defeat of a Hulk, though one of them is rather skeptical about it. Hulk flashes back to Sakaar and Kyra, which makes him even angrier to the point that he tackles Iron Man into Avengers Tower, causing the entire building to collapse. Only the Hulk emerges, carrying Stark's unconscious body. As the other heroes rush to the site, the Warbound arrive to provide backup.
Like I said before, the Warbound consists of Korg, yes, Thor's buddy from the MCU, and the stone alien race that he squared off with back in his first adventure, which we covered in the Thor Masterworks Volume 1. Meek, a Sakaran insectoid creature who was part of a hive that got obliterated by the Red King. Eloi Kefu, who is basically a member of Sakaran nobility who turned on the Red King long before the events of Planet Hulk, that storyline that I've been talking about. And then there's No Name, a member of the Brood, a longtime alien race foe of the X-Men. And then wrapping things up is the sorcerer and priest Heroim.
She-Hulk steps forth to attempt to reason with her cousin, but just gets pounded to the pavement. Ditto for Ares from the Avengers. Eventually, an all-out brawl erupts between the Warbound and the two teams of Avengers.
Remember, this is taking place after Marvel's Civil War event, where the government passed the Superhuman Registration Act, basically requiring superheroes to register their identities and become government employees under the parameters of Tony Stark, who reclaimed the title of Secretary of Defense. Now, this in turn has split the Avengers into registered and unregistered teams, though Stark has promised immunity to any unregistered heroes willing to help fight the Hulk. Also around this time, Reed and Sue Richards elect to take a step back from the Fantastic Four due to their marriage being strained by the Civil War event, so they have kind of been replaced by the Black Panther and Storm, who have recently married in the Black Panther series.
It's then that the Hulk spots Reed Richards powering up a weapon and leads an assault on the Baxter building. He marches through the Human Torch and the Thing, while the rest of the Warbound go after the others. Finally, the Sentry arrives to talk the Hulk down. Except this isn't the dumb Hulk from before. He knows this is just an illusion by Reed Richards. Hulk smashes through one of Sue Storm's invisible force fields and literally begins stretching Reed Richards to the limit. The Warbound then begin dragging the unconscious heroes to Madison Square Garden, where Rick Jones is waiting. He tries to reason with the Hulk, pleading with him to stop, even mentioning that Captain America's death after the Civil War. It does seem to work, which allows Doctor Strange to enter the Hulk's mind and try to reason with him, only for the Hulk's anger to literally kick him back out and toss the two into the East River. While that plays out, the U.S. government prepares for General Thunderbolt Ross and the Hulkbusters to enter New York City. Ross launches a rocket right into the Hulk, which allows Doctor Strange to re-enter the Hulk's mind. The Hulk cannot touch Strange's astral form, but Strange can still affect him with magic. That being said, Strange is willing to reason with Bruce Banner, and the Hulk eventually gives in. Once more, Banner relives the events on Sakaar, and Strange points out that there's absolutely no way that the Illuminati could have known what was going to happen with the ship, and begins to take a tangible form. That is just what the Hulk wanted, as he grabs Strange's hands, crushing them on both planes of existence. Strange is forced to leap back to his physical form, now with completely useless hands, as the Hulk prepares to march towards the Sanctum Sanctorum. A desperate president calls for the Sentry to have an impact in the battle, but to little effect. Elsewhere, the rest of the Warbound begin making preparations to Madison Square Garden.
Well, it's the best thing to happen to that arena since the Knicks went to the NBA Finals in 1999.
Back at the Sanctum, Strange begins preparing for the Hulk's arrival by having Wong grab a unique box. The Warbound's own magic practitioner, Heroim, arrives to try to reason with Strange, but to no avail. The Sorcerer Supreme has been left with no other choice but to call upon the demon Zom to thwart the Hulk.
Zom is a demonic entity that is so powerful that even longtime Doctor Strange adversary, the Dread Dormammu, lives in fear of him. Now, Strange was eventually able to contain Zom after a combined effort from him, his mentor, the Ancient One, and the being known as the Living Tribunal.
As the Warbound prepare to make their own gladiatorial combat arena, Rick once more begins pleading with the Hulk to stop, only to be shoved aside by Meek. It's then that Doctor Strange arrives, powered by Zom's magic. The power is enough for Doctor Strange to begin tossing the Hulk around like a rag doll, and buildings begin to fall. In particular, they begin to fall upon a small gathering of human followers that the Hulk and the Warbound have picked up. Realizing that he's causing harm to innocents, break Doctor Strange's concentration enough that he loses his grip on Zom and the powers along with it. This allows the Hulk to regain the upper hand and pummel Strange into unconsciousness. With that, all the heroes are outfitted with obedience control modules. As the stage is set for Madison Square Garden to be turned into a gladiatorial arena, where the gladiators are the Illuminati battling against each other, and against a giant monster the Hulk called up to see if they could actually fight. Eventually, though, Reed Richards is forced to try to land a killing blow on Tony Stark. Reed is doing his best to fight his obedience module, as Tony is working from afar to try to bring in a specialized attack from a network of defense satellites that he's hacked into. Also, his computers can tell that the Sentry is now on the way.
I should point out that around this time, Tony Stark had exposed himself to what was essentially an intelligent virus called Extremis that allowed him basically full access to any form of technology, the ability to control things the way he saw fit. He can control his Iron Man armor without having to necessarily be wearing it, for example.
The Sentry finally arrives, but he's not here to reason with the Hulk, and he tosses the Jade Giant across the city, causing all sorts of buildings to begin falling apart. This prompts the heroes to take action to protect all the innocents from being killed by the falling debris. The Hulk begins to fight back, much to the Sentry's delight, as he begins to unleash the power of a million exploding suns, even going as far as to create what could best be called a solar tornado. As more damage continues to be wrought, Tony uses Extremis to finally tap into all the satellites to prepare them to fire. Finally, there's a massive explosion that results in both the Sentry and Hulk reverting to their human forms. It's then that Bob Reynolds collapses. Rick Jones begins to make his way back towards a completely exhausted Banner, who seems willing to at least listen to him this time, only for an irate Meek to jump in and run Jones through with a lance. As Rick lays dying, Banner hulks out once more and begins attacking Meek, who is overjoyed at what's just happened and reveals the truth about what happened back on Sakaar.
Like I said before, all of Meek's kind were slaughtered by the forces of the Red King, so he held no love for any of the other Sakarans. And in fact, he really wanted to obliterate them all. He didn't want the Hulk to settle down, marry one of them, and then rule them like a king. So when he saw a group of people who were loyal to the Red King loading a compromised warp core onto the Hulk's ship, well, he used that to set it off as the bomb that wound up wiping out most of Sakaar, thus bringing back the raging Hulk that Meek wanted.
The other members of the Warbound who are trying to stop the Hulk from attacking Meek stand down as the Hulk snaps and completely obliterates the bug. He then denies Reed's attempts to comfort him, pointing out that even though technically they didn't cause the ship to explode, the Illuminati is still responsible for pretty much everything that happened. It's then the Hulk begins preparing to unleash massive amounts of gamma radiation, and Tony is forced to call down the shot from the satellites in order to siphon the radiation and revert the Hulk back to his human form of Bruce Banner. The members of the Warbound are arrested and taken into custody, with Bruce Banner and Rick Jones both being placed in suspended animation. But while there are survivors, not much is left of the Illuminati who are not overjoyed or relieved to be through of any of this. This is not the end of the story, however, as elsewhere on the smoldering remains of Sakaar, a new being emerges from some type of radioactive primordial soup. It is Sakaar, son of the Hulk, and he is reborn.
This would lead to something of a reboot of sorts for the Hulk. Basically, his ongoing series would continue, but as the Incredible Hercules instead. And then we would get a new Hulk #1, which would feature a new Red Hulk, later revealed to be General Thunderbolt Ross. That's not a big spoiler. I'm pretty sure you've all seen the trailers to Captain America Brave New World at this point. Not only that, but Rick Jones would also become a Hulk-like monster called A-Bomb. Betty Ross, General Ross's daughter and Bruce's longtime love, would become a Red She-Hulk. And, of course, Scar, the son of the Hulk, would make his way to Earth to begin fighting his father. But those are different reviews for different times. How was World War Hulk? Well, I do really like Johnny Romita Jr.'s artwork in here, and I think he particularly handles the action sequences really well. He gets the intensity, he gets the gravitas, he gets everything with these big impactful blows, I think, that really do strike the right chord. And I do like a lot of the characterization in this, with the Hulk and the Illuminati, and, given the idea that there would be people who were sympathetic to the Hulk in this case, given what happened, and, just that kind of idea. If I have a drawback, it's that this really isn't an event comic. This is a Hulk Illuminati story, but it's not a World War Hulk. I mean, I understand most of the Marvel heroes tend to be headquartered in New York City, so yeah, you're going to focus on the action there, but it doesn't feel like a World War Hulk because we don't show the whole world being involved. It's New York City Hulk, basically. And it does feel like the Illuminati really didn't get their comeuppance. I mean, yeah, they got beaten a bunch, but it's not like they're walking away with some great lesson learned here. It's just, you can see them looking really sorry, and that's about it. So it kind of falls short in that aspect as well. And not to mention the story itself kind of gets repetitive. I mean, it's literally Hulk goes after Black Bolt, who, okay, that's fine. But then we go, Hulk goes after Iron Man, who apologizes, he beats up Iron Man. He goes after Doctor Strange, who apologizes, he beats him up. He goes after Reed Richards, who apologizes. And it's like, okay, we are literally just doing the same thing over and over and over again, and that does lead to a fairly hollow feeling. Again, this is a good Hulk Illuminati story, but it's not a crossover event, which is what they tried to make it. And I do think that's where it sort of fell apart. And yeah, that's just kind of how things work with this. It leads to a very uneven and flat story overall, just kind of because it should have had a greater impact than it really did. So that's kind of why, much like Fantastic Four Disassembled, I have to give World War Hulk a D. I think I gave it a C in my first review, but yeah, in retrospect, it's probably down a lot lower. It's just, again, it kind of just didn't follow through on the execution very well. And with that, let's see what we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can support my work at patreon.com/CP Time for Cat Productions, where you can even request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so that you can be notified for further videos.